very much, Grant. It's an honor to be able to share my lived experiences with your chapter in Cape Town. My name is Phillimon Zongo. I wear two hats. My primary role, I work as the CEO of the Cyber Leadership Institute. We train aspiring and seasoned cyber leaders, and we equip them with skills to accelerate themselves into the C-suite and the respect of business executives in the boards and thrive in that space. And 50% of my time I spend as a CISO. So I work as a strategy consultant, helping organizations uncover their critical blind spots and formulate high-impact cyber resilience strategies to improve their cyber resilience postures and to accelerate change. So really excited to be here. I'm an author of 2 books, The 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience, and my memoir, which is called The Gift of Obstacles. Really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Phillimon, for that. Kenny?
Yes, for those of you who don't know me, Kenny Stein. I'm also part of the team setting up the ISC2 Chapter in Cape Town, and also an honor to meet you again, Phillimon, and to have this presentation. So I'm looking forward to it. I've got a few questions lined up, which we want to kick off with. So Phillimon, we all know you as a global thought leader and an author and a keynote speaker. Can you share a little about your journey, some career highlights, and some of the challenges you might have faced along the way, and how you overcame that? Because that is really something that inspires us to more.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And as I often do, I will take you back where it started. Then we're going to squeeze that story, because as you appreciate, it's a story that's contained in a 250 pages book, but I will do it in a few minutes. So I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. So I migrated to Australia 17 years ago. But I was born and raised in rural Zimbabwe, a place called Mondoro, which is about 120 kilometers southwest of Harare. And as I've shared many times with a lot of people here, I grew up in abject poverty. I got my first pair of shoes when I was 12. I moved out to rent by myself when I was under 14 years of age. I lived in a room that had no running water, that had no electricity, that had no windows, and it had a makeshift unlockable door, which meant that when I lifted my door and placed it, because it had been destroyed by termites and it couldn't hinge either side. Further compounding my challenges at that young age, 2 of the rooms in that 3-roomed structure were occupied by 2 of the most hardened prostitutes in the Growth Point. And that exposed me to a lot of domestic violence at a young age. They brought in a lot of strange men. They fought when some of the clients refused to pay. I literally saw some of the drunkards literally pull braids out of their heads. And, Friday nights, I ran back home, which was 23 kilometers away, barefooted, and ran back Monday morning. But like I say, that's why my book is called The Gift of Obstacles. It is those moments that hardened my will to keep going, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Fast track to 2003, I graduated with a degree in IT at Midland State University. That's why I was very excited to see Carrington here. He was one of my university mates at MSU. Then I traveled to Harare to look for a job. I was fortunate enough to land a job as an IT networking intern at one of Zimbabwe's best ISPs. So I got the job. I was super excited. This was a time that I'd been waiting for more than 2.5 decades to eventually break the back of poverty, give my aging parents a dignified life, and take my younger sister's education. But unfortunately, by the time that I landed in the Sunshine City, as we call it, the Zimbabwean economy was already on its knees, with several companies closing, decimated by hyperinflation that was blazing uncontrollably like bushfires. So I suddenly found myself playing defense. I couldn't pay my rent. I was struggling to commute to work, let alone take care of my aging parents. And that's when the concept of self-awareness started to emerge. I acknowledged that in as much as got a lot of respect back in my village, people thought I was a genius because I graduated with computer science at a university. I was ill-equipped to compete at a global stage. I sent, hundreds of applications applying for jobs in the United States, in Europe, in Australia, everywhere. But I got zero responses. And like I said, I then became self-aware. Luckily, during my time at MSU, I had developed website developing skills. So I took up a side hustle after work and during weekends and started developing websites. After 6 months, I raised $500 and managed to pay for my certified information systems auditor exam. Back then, around 2004, 2005, CISA or CISO, whatever you call it, was a major differentiator. It helped me beat competition. I think there was maybe less than 10 of us with that designation in Zimbabwe. So that opened tremendous opportunities. I got an opportunity at PwC in Harare and also at Deloitte in Harare, but I decided to go to Deloitte. I was at Deloitte for about 18 months, and then I started applying for roles overseas again. But now my situation was much different. I had my CISO designation and Big Four experiences, and doors started to open. I got offers to join PwC in London, in Sydney, and also in Auckland, in New Zealand. In September 2007, I packed my little things and I flew, from OR International Airport in Joburg, 11,000 kilometers plus to start a new life in Australia or the land down under. So I was super excited. I was joining PwC as a senior consultant, and my salary had improved more than 7,000%, which surprises a lot of my Australian colleagues until I tell them that my salary at Deloitte Harare was less than $100. So the upside was seemed uncapped. But anyway, I joined PwC in September 2007 as a senior consultant. But again, back home in Africa in general or back in Zimbabwe, one's technical skills and academic qualifications almost always guaranteed unobstructed ascension into senior roles. Here in Australia, the landscape was markedly different. It was one's ability to influence critical decision makers, to communicate with clarity and persuasion, to win new business during the consulting gigs, and to navigate complex and entrenched political systems. There were better predictors of success as compared to technical competencies. Unfortunately, I stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich, and I paid dearly. I joined as a senior consultant. I was technically adept. I could audit AS400 systems, Linux boxes, Oracle databases, and core banking applications in my head. I was a major weapon for IT, for external audit teams. But I missed promotion. The juniors that I trained accelerated past me into managerial roles. And, that combined with, the challenges that I got here, when I moved here, the constant struggle to belong, the deeply rooted belief that my odds to succeed here in a foreign space were razor thin, proved quite overwhelming. I could hardly see people who looked like me. There were no role models that looked like me in the Australian IT audit or technology space at large. And in December 2011, I reached my limit. I resigned from my role at PwC. I terminated my lease. I sold everything, and I flew back to Harare with no intentions of coming back. I was done with Australia. Fortunately, when I landed in Harare, the planned negotiations that I had with Ernst & Young to join them as a senior consultant fell through. And after 6 months, I was forced to return back to Australia. I got I had a short stint with a South African company here called Dimension Data, and I was soon headhunted to join one of the largest insurance firms here called AFP as an IT risk manager. So all in all, I was at AMP for about 6 years, but my career acceleration story started in the summer of 2013 or 2014, thereabouts. You know, I sat down and realized that in as much as I wore nicely fitted suits and I had the illusion of success, I was a technology risk manager in a big financial services institution. I was literally tinkering around the edges of my potential. So I took a few weeks or months to strategize. I wanted to find one thing that I could do that could make me run away from competition. You know, I wanted to become the Tiger Woods of cybersecurity or technology risk, you know, to become so good that potential employers or clients, should I decide to do my own thing, could not deny me. So after contemplating, I realized that if I was able to sharpen my business writing skills, especially working in technology risk and cybersecurity, where 90% plus of corporate directors and senior business leaders find the subject to be highly ambiguous and complex, I would be able to differentiate myself from my peers. So anyway, I got down to work from January to March in 2015. I studied 8 books on business writing, and that set for me a very strong foundation. I mastered matters of form, principles of composition, and how to write with clarity, persuasion, and impact. But like it's one thing to study. Writing comes when you roll up your sleeve and you jump into the tunnel or into the trenches. So I started writing. You know, it took me 3.5 months for me to write my first ever article, which centered on how do you manage cybersecurity or technology risk when you are migrating business critical application to public cloud. And public cloud by that time it was quite novel. Not many companies were migrating to AWS or to Microsoft Cloud. So it was a great opportunity for me. So I went through moments of frantic boredom, angry hopelessness of wanting to quit forever. You know, the dreaded writer's grip, crippled me. I couldn't find the words. But like I say all the time, you know, the stakes were way too high for me to revert back to my isolated corner. So I kept at it. And after 3.5 months, I finalized my article. I didn't know what to do with it. I thought about posting it on LinkedIn, but then I thought, you know, after all this toy, what if I put it on LinkedIn and I get 2 likes? It's not worth it. I have nothing to lose here. So I emailed it to the ISC editorial team in Chicago. And after a few weeks, I was traveling to work. I opened my Gmail. I got an email from the ISC editorial team saying, we love your article and we are going to publish it in our next international journal. And that moment changed my life, because a day before I was just an ordinary technology risk manager walking across the streets of Sydney. But now my thought leadership would be published across 200 countries and read by almost 500,000 professionals. And my belief system kept expanding. Then I asked myself a question that I have always, you know, used to underpin my career acceleration journey, which is, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? So I decided to write another article, and this time I focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence. Send it to ISC again, and in 2017, my article was voted ISC's best article of the year globally. I was invited to Chicago to receive one of ISC's highest global accolades for major contributions to the field of cybersecurity and technology risk. And that was one of my most humbling moments. I sat at the same table with CISOs and technology risk directors from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the US Congress, Oracle, to mention but a few. You know, as I walked across the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, everything about that place, you know, the high-end designer shops, upmarket restaurants, and 5-star hotels were stark contradictions to the decades that I spent strolling barefooted across the rugged Savannah plains and across the impoverished Harare ghettos. And again, my belief system kept changing and improving. When I was flying from LA to Sydney, I thought again, what can I do if I wasn't afraid? I decided to write my first book. It took me 18 months of writing every day. And in July mid-2018, I published my first book, which was The 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience. Opened tremendous opportunities for me, connected me with people I never imagined I would ever talk to in my life, got a lot of awards. And again, this is very important because we're talking about cybersecurity. Like I said, I was always working in the technology risk space. But back in 2016, I realized that, working in technology risk and IT audit, I was a jack of all trades and master of none. For me to differentiate myself, especially working as a minority in this space, I really needed to be very good at something, to be as sharp as the edge of a spear. So I decided to move into cybersecurity. I applied for a role. We also said, I will take you into cybersecurity, but you're going to swallow your ego. So I was a technology risk manager. They moved me 2 levels down and I became a cybersecurity analyst. I was organizing risk registers, facilitating pen tests and taking minutes in meetings and doing all the donkey work no one else was willing to do. But again, without taking those 2 steps back, there's no way I would be here today. In 2017, after about 2 years in cybersecurity, armed with my thought leadership, I was invited for an interview by one of Australia's most reputable wealth management firms. The imposter syndrome quickly lifted its ugly head, told me you're not technical enough. There was no one who looked like me in Australia who was a CISO in that space. And, but armed with my thought leadership, I showed up for the interview. I interviewed at 3 p.m., 5 p.m. They called me and said, we've hired you as a CISO. So, I've been in this space in the same role for the last 6.5 years. And now coming to the conclusion of my brief narrative, the difficulties and the solitude that characterize my formative years in cyber leadership. Like I said, I was so much afraid to fail. People were speaking behind my back that he's not technical enough, he's too young. I was 36 years old and relatively young as compared to an average Australian CISO. Needless to say, like I mentioned, I am Black, I am from rural Zimbabwe. There was no one who looked like me in that space. But again, like, the interviewer was saying, how, these obstacles have facilitated my career acceleration, those difficulties and the solitude in me and 2 of my industry, 2 of my business partners, Jan Schroeder and Darren Argyle, to co-found the Cyber Leadership Institute, which is an organization that is equipped or trained the cyber leaders from more than 60 countries, including executives from the US Air Force, from McKinsey, KPMG, the Australian government, Commonwealth Bank, to mention but a few. We started with only 5 students in our cyber leadership class. But like I said, just this start, we started a class yesterday. For the first time in the last 5 years, we turned people away because we were at capacity. But again, I share my story to encourage you to say, whatever you want in life, as long as you're willing to play the long game, as long as you've got the belief, you have got the belief and you constantly act, you keep acting in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacle. No matter where you are, no matter who you are, you can rewrite your narrative. And that's why when Grant said the theme of this webinar is about career acceleration, gone are the days when you show up at an interview and say, I've been in cybersecurity for 20 years, so give me the job. We have seen people who have come through the Cyber Leadership Institute, who have accelerated themselves by being quite deliberate about their personal brands and, sharpening the skills that you need to land a CISO role and to thrive in that space. So that's my long story short. But like I said, it's a story that's encapsulated in a 250 pages book, which is my memoir, The Gift of Obstacles. So thank you very much. Sorry, a little bit wordy there, but I thought I would give a bit more context of where I am coming from and where I get my inspiration from.
Thank you, Phillimon. That's quite an amazing story. You remind me of a definition of success that says success is not measured by the heights to which you climb, but from the depths from which you crawl. And clearly your story speaks
Wow.
volumes in that space. And that is very, very inspiring. Thank you so much. To those of you that have joined
Appreciate
since Phillimon started, you'll see at the bottom of the screen it says Grant. Grant is opened the meeting. I'm Kenny Steyn, and I'm just facilitating the questions for the time being. Phillimon, the next question I want to ask you is regarding encouragement for professionals. In most of us online, to some degree or another, want to accelerate our cybersecurity careers, myself included. I know this is something that's quite passionate for you, and that you have the desire to help people accelerate their careers in cybersecurity, even based on the last story you mentioned. What advice and tips or insights can you share with the team in this regard?
Okay, great. So thank you very much. And again, I'm very passionate about this, and I will only share lived experiences. The number one thing I always share with my mentees is effectiveness. No matter where you are in business, in politics, in civil life, effectiveness requires extreme focus. So the biggest challenge that I see with people is, like I said before, they spread themselves thinly across everything, like butter on toast. And what I have learned is the market rewards expertise. And, for you to be able to accelerate, to beat competition, for example, you need to have unique skills. You need to become great at something. And that's why, for me, even when I traveled to South Africa, it was actually last year where I met Grant. I keynoted at a conference in Cape Town. He was inspired by my story and by my keynote. We had a little side chat, and he said, what can I do to accelerate my career? The one thing that I recommended Grant is you need to start writing. And why writing? Writing, I don't know of anything that's able to deepen your expertise more than writing. So when I was writing my book, The 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience, I went through more than 250 references. And dozens of those references are other books, which means we are going really deep. And one thing I like about writing is, a lot of us, a few of my friends here know that, I like social media, I like personal branding, I like Instagram. Sometimes if I'm fine dining, I like to celebrate life. But with writing, there is nothing like that. Everything happens in the trenches. Everything happens in darkness. So the only outcome that you see at the end is my final draft. But sometimes I've gone through a dozen drafts. I have to prune. I write a first draft, I peer review it, I write quickly and swiftly, I review it, I edit it, and I go through a lot of iterations. As I am writing and referring to other people's work, and by doing that, I am able to accelerate my learning. And why did I write the 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience? When I transitioned from technology risk into cybersecurity, I realized that I was about a decade or 10 years behind my peers with whom I graduated together in college, but they went straight into cybersecurity. I spent almost 10 years in technology risk. So my question was, how do I come from behind and succeed? How do I, and the only thing that came to mind then was I needed to focus on writing. So that's why, but the broader message here is about personal branding. You need to stand out. You need to be known for something. You think of the most elite sports people out there. Serena Williams, she's known for her power save. Ask Tiger Woods. He can sink putts from anywhere. He's known for his short game. You ask who else, it could be Djokovic. He's known for his resilience. So my point is, you need to identify, you need to go deep before you go wide. Like I said, I see people every time on LinkedIn. Today you're posting about politics, tomorrow you're posting about fitness, tomorrow you're posting about cybersecurity. You can't be great at all things. That's my point. So identify, one space that you want to operate. So normally I call it a niche. Then within that niche, you need to find a niche within a niche. You can't just tell me you are great at cybersecurity. That's way too broad. You know, go really hard at something. It could be cloud security. It could be GRC. It could be cyber leadership. Now I work in cyber leadership. It could be penetration testing, whatever it is. You know, identify one niche and go really hard at it and be known. You know, when I think about, say, pen test, you know, I need to think about your name, you know, but that comes from two things. Number one is you are constantly publishing high quality thought leadership, which means, you know, you show up on LinkedIn, you you share your expertise, you write long form blogs, you write short form articles, you publish in peer reviewed magazines. And again, you know, it's not just about me. Grant is there. You know, when we had that short conversation with Grant, I said, you write an article, I will peer review it for you, and then I will introduce you to an editor in ISACA. And, you know, he stuck with it. You know, he was so hungry. And right now, Grant has published several thought leadership articles. He's out there. He's become a voice in demand only within a year. Obviously, he had his technical expertise and stuff. But my point here is effectiveness requires extreme focus. My number one recommendation is you need to start writing. A lot of people want to, they want to jump into video. You can go into video, that's okay. But I think writing forces you to be much more disciplined than anything else, because, you know, you can't just fluff around. You have to go through several drafts. You know, you have got an opportunity to rewrite your work before you publish it. You know, if you just show up at interviews or your video, sometimes it's just the first draft. So my recommendation here is become great, be known for one thing, do it very well, and the market will pay you for it.
Thanks, Phillimon. That's very inspiring. I'm reminded as you speak of a golfer of old who was asked the question, you know, was stated that he was so lucky to be able to have achieved so much and be able to be so accurate in putting the golf ball on a particular spot on the green. And his response was much like yours. Paraphrasing, he said, the more he practices and the more he focuses on specific things, the luckier he gets, you know. So it's not about luck, but clearly about the hard work and the effort you put in and the positioning and the focus. And you've just reiterated that point very, very loudly, especially in this area of cybersecurity that is a sea of, let's say, knowledge and of unknown, you know, for many of us. So thank you for that. That was fantastic. So you've alluded to your book a few times. So just, you know, on the book, 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience, you speak of the 5 pillars and how critical they are. Perhaps you can step through those 5 pillars and just guide us as to why they are so critical.
Okay, great. And again, the same principle, you know, when I determined to write this book, I think it's good to give context. Like I said, when I moved into cybersecurity, I downloaded every white paper that I could find. I bought so many books on cybersecurity, but I was frustrated because I found that a lot of those books or articles were rooted in technology and not business. And I realized if I, who have spent more than a decade working deeply in technology, I am struggling to understand this important subject, very important subject. What about a corporate director who hails from a business background? So again, I decided to turn my lemons into proverbial lemonade, and I wrote this book for myself. Number one, you know, I wanted to close the skills gap. Like I said, I felt like I was 10 years behind, but I wanted to come from behind and succeed. You know, when you see like Usain Bolt overtaking people on the cave, that's exactly the same feeling. But I needed to do something that was unique, that was difficult. And so anyway, I focused on the 5 anchors because I realized that the cybersecurity world is very expansive. You go to ISO, it's got dozens and dozens of control. PCI has got more than 200 controls. So I wanted to zoom into 5 critical areas which, if organizations got right, they would significantly reduce their cyber risk posture without breaking the bank. So what are those 5 angles to your questions? Number one, like I said, again, effectiveness requires extreme focus. So as a CISO, as a virtual CISO, the first thing that we do, we conduct a risk assessment and we help organizations uncover their critical blind spots, and we present that to the board. The second stage means we need to collaborate with senior business leaders and technology experts and identify what we call crown jewels. So these are your most important digital assets that underpin your competitive advantage, intellectual property, and support the business lines that your customers value the most. In short, if those systems are compromised, the business is in jeopardy. So that is number one, to say you identify, you've got 200 systems. What are the top 20 systems that really matter? So we then come up with a differentiated cybersecurity strategy that disproportionately allocates resources to defend those crown jewels. Obviously, we will implement controls like user access management, vulnerability scanning across the entire suite. But when we talk about crown jewels, we need to identify those systems. And we come up with a model which I call the non-negotiable controls, where you say each of those systems needs to feed logs into a 24/7 SOC. They need to have privileged access management. Data has to be encrypted at rest. We need to review privileged access every quarter. So MFA on this system. So again, that's number one. The second one is, as we know, 90% plus. I won't bore you with old statistics. 90% plus of all data breaches, have got their root in people. Either someone is deceived or they do something silly or it's human error. So the second pillar is about creating a cyber savvy workforce where we create deeply entrenched belief systems that protecting the organization from the rising menace of cybercrime is everyone's responsibility, from the board of directors up to frontline staff. So it's about cybersecurity awareness, but on a much broader scale, where we focus on culture, not just, bite-sized awareness training. Then the second one is obviously, technology is fundamentally changing the way we live and interact, with ChatGPT, with machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain. All these transformative technologies have got huge potential to drive profits and improve humanity. So the third pillar is around baking cybersecurity early into digital transformation programs, because as you know very well, trying to retrofit cybersecurity into products that have gone live costs maybe 5 times more than if we build security early, we bought it, we train our developers, we make it an embedded aspect of software development life cycle. Then the fourth pillar is around the supply chain. We know with all the big data breaches, starting from Target in 2013, when they lost 40 million payment card details because they had a third party who was remotely accessing their network just for the purposes of submitting invoices. So an average organization, when I was writing my book in America, they had about 20,000 suppliers. We know cybersecurity teams are small. People are stressed because you're dealing with a lot of moving parts. So again, like I said, we need to differentiate those suppliers into 3 distinct buckets: high risk, medium risk, low risk, simplified. Then we spend a lot of resources, building legally enforceable security clauses into contracts with high risk suppliers. We do security reviews once every year. We require them to produce SOC 2 type 2 reports and overlay that with pen tests. Then the last, but by no means least, is we need to set the tone at the top, which means that, we implement highly effective cyber risk governance committees. And just to share a quick example, when we work as a virtual CISO, like I said, after we draft a high impact cybersecurity strategy, the next bit we do is we need to formulate or establish a cross-functional cyber risk governance committee which is comprised of all the senior business leaders, you know, your C-suite, the CEO, the COO, the chief financial officer, the legal, the product development team. So we meet, you know, if the organization is just starting on the journey, we meet every month. We elevate cybersecurity to become a corporate KPI, and the CEO becomes answerable to the board, which means if I get this right as a CISO, my role is 50% done because the CEO will hold fellow executives accountable. So those are the 5 pillars of cyber resilience. But I give a disclaimer, there's much more you can do in cybersecurity. But I strongly believe that if you get these 5 pillars right, you will significantly reduce your cyber risk exposure without breaking the bank.
Thanks, Phillimon. Some comments that are coming through on the chat is where can your book be purchased? Is it online? Are they in bookstores?
Amazon, I would say go to Amazon. For my 5 anchors is purely on Amazon. My memoir is on Amazon, but it's also available audio version on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Play, or anywhere where you can find audiobooks.
Great, thank you. So I've got one more question for you, Phillimon, and just for the audience, while Phillimon is responding to this question, we're going to have a few moments for open questions afterwards. Pop your questions in the chat so long while he's chatting, then we have record of them. We'll get to some of them, and then at least we also have record of what sort of questions you are asking if we can't get to answering them on this call. So please pop your questions in the chat. Last question, Phillimon, it's regarding your journey so far. I mean, you've had an incredibly exciting and challenging journey, but in that space, one also learns things. So what would you do differently if you could, and why?
Oh, what a great question. What a great question. Yeah, you know, it's what would I do differently? There's not much I would change. And I'll tell you why, because as you can tell from my book and the stuff that I post on LinkedIn, you know, I am extremely vulnerable. You know, I think at first it was very difficult for me to embrace my story. Maybe that's one thing that I would change, and I would have done it much earlier. When I started accelerating my journey, I was very fortunate enough back in 2017 or 2018, thereabouts. You know, I received ISC2 Sydney's first ever best cybersecurity or IT governance professional of the year. It was one of my most humbling moments. You know, it coincided with ISC2 in Sydney celebrating its 40th anniversary in front of the people who founded the chapter back in 1976. And again, like I said, this was the most significant achievement of my life, being an immigrant here, being a minority here. And I wanted to share my success on LinkedIn. So I went back home and I wrote a post and I wanted to put it on LinkedIn. And again, I started the way I started this chart, saying I got my first pair of shoes when I was 12. I used to run 23 kilometers to school, blah, 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 blah. I deleted that 6 times because, you know, growing up, you know, poverty was a source of shame. You know, we did all we could to, you know, to mask poverty from the public. You know, if a dignified visitor was visiting our village and we were eating sadza with something embarrassing, we'd just, you know, slide it under a stove or something, because poverty was humiliating. You know, people didn't want to be your friends sometimes in school because, you know, we wore shorts that severely exposed our buttocks, you know. So for me, that was the biggest. So I deleted it 6 times until I gathered the courage to post. So I posted it and I went to bed because I was so much afraid of negativity and internet trolls. When I woke up the next morning, my post had gone viral. It reached 100,000 views. It generated more than, almost 6,000 likes, thousands of comments. I interacted with a guy who was a CEO of a large chemical manufacturing company in Europe, which is, a revenue of almost 5-10 billion euros. And, so I couldn't believe that, the story that I was hiding for all this time, like more than 30 years of life, opened tremendous doors to connect with people, inspire not only people back in my home continent in Africa, but also to inspire fellow Australians who lived with a lot of privilege, but they never acknowledged the privilege that they had. So that again marked a turning point. I started to embrace my story. I started to become myself. When I was working at PwC, I pretended to like things that I didn't like. I pretended to like rugby or cricket, or I don't like those sports because I like soccer. I'm a rural boy. I like soccer, and this is who I am. And when I moved here, I was 27. So I've got my values. I got things that I like. So if there's one thing that I would do, would be to embrace my story much earlier than I did, because a lot of people fake around, but what really connects us to people, especially when you're building your personal brand. That's why if you go on my LinkedIn, I share a lot about cyber leadership, but I also share my struggles. I share my successes, because people want to connect with a human being. They want to relate. Like I said, when I moved here, my career acceleration was slow because I didn't have any relatable role models. I had executives who lived in Mosman, which is like one of the most richest suburbs here in Australia. They couldn't relate to my story. So that's why I share my stories, to inspire other people who are stuck in seemingly insurmountable situations, and inspire them to say, if I could run 23 kilometers to school, surely you can do it. There's a lot of people who want to transition into cybersecurity, but they don't want to, or they are scared to do it. But if I tell them, if I transitioned into cybersecurity when I was almost 35 years old, and I have achieved all that I have achieved in the last 6-7 years, surely you also can do it. So that's one thing that I would do better, is to become just myself and, acknowledge my failures and my strengths.
Thanks, Phillimon. I think you iterate a bit of my own walk, and that is the challenges and the failures in the past are what got us where we are today. And if we didn't do those learnings, we would not be here. So absolutely, that's fantastic. We have a few questions, so I'll start with the first one from Deirdre. What are your views on the challenges women in cybersecurity are facing, and what recommendations do you have on how to overcome them?
Yeah, great question. And the challenges are multifaceted, and historically we know that women have been underrepresented in technology broadly. And I think statistics show that it's even worse in cybersecurity. And what are the challenges? The number one challenge is the imposter syndrome. How do you navigate and break into a male-dominated space? And in cybersecurity, for example, it's an industry that's full of big egos. And like I said, if you're not considered technical enough, there is a lot of negative stigma that comes with it. So I would say, for me, because I sit in interviews, and right now I'm interviewing for a CISO role, and interview women, interview men. I think it's the belief system. Definitely, I've seen women get it CISO roles and thrive. Like I said, we train people at the Cyber Leadership Institute. A lot of people who come and win our cyber strategy competition, which is very intense, which is very competitive, because you're competing with fellow CISOs who've been running this from across the globe. I think more than 50% of our winners are women. So again, that demonstrates that, it's not a matter of capability. It's just how do we work the belief system and help accelerate women into cyber leaders. So my number one recommendation is you need to get a mentor. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a woman. There are a lot of great men out there, who are, great supporters for the cause. That's why, to give you a practical example, we've been highly intentional about this in the Cyber Leadership Institute. That's one of our main goals. We've partnered with the Australian Women in Cybersecurity Network. We've partnered with the top 100 women in Africa. We give out scholarships to accelerate women into cyber leadership positions, because we realize that, if we just recruiting people to join our cyber leadership class, less than 30% of women apply to get into the cyber leadership program. So we've been intentional about it. We've given out scholarships, I think, that are worth more than $75,000. And I'm talking of a business that we've bootstrapped from scratch. It's a business that doesn't make any profit yet. But again, like I said, we need to lead in practical ways. And I relate that, like I said, as a Black man in Australia, I know how it feels to be a minority in a space. So my recommendation is, just work on your belief system. Like I said, if you work on thought leadership, I think that will delete the imposter syndrome, because for me, it took me 8 years of writing every day. And now I get published by Forbes. I can publish as many articles as I want in Forbes magazine, which is great. So just by doing that, if I show up with some printouts from Forbes in an interview, I show up with a book, it deletes the imposter syndrome. So, work on your personal branding, find a mentor, and also reach out. Like I said, we help women in the cyber leadership program. If you reach out on LinkedIn, I can find ways where we can help you in practical ways. But great question.
Thanks, Phillimon. There's some good advice there. And even for us men as well, there's getting a mentor in working on our personal brand is also great advice. We have another question from Shaheen. With the rapid pace of technological change, how can professionals future-proof their skills to remain relevant in the cybersecurity field?
Oh, wow. Great question there. And there's two ways to do, like I said, I spend a lot of time trying to help young professionals break into cybersecurity. The number one recommendation I do is you need to go grab the jobs report from the World Economic Forum, which predicts the future of jobs. And, so you can see which spaces are going to thrive in the next 5 to 10 years, and you place yourself there. So like I said, you need to become great at one thing, but you also can't be great at something that the market doesn't demand. So you need to be wise about it. So I would say that's number one. The second thing that's important, again, I go back to the basics. You need to work on the classic skills, like, business writing skills. For example, once you master these fundamental skills like business writing, for me, just last month, I published an article in Forbes talking about ChatGPT and machine learning. Have I ever developed a ChatGPT program? Hell no. But because those concepts, I can transport them across every domain. I know how to research. I know how to accelerate my learning and research and condense learnings on a topic. So I would say number one is, just align yourself with the future of jobs, because as we progress, a lot of jobs are going to get automated. When we started before, like I said, if you had your CISO or CISM, those were big differentiators. But over time, there were thousands of people with CISOs in Zimbabwe. Like I said, I stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich and paid dearly. So there's three things. Number one is identify, have a vision. That's why having a mentor is very, very important, because, you can't just be pen testing in 10 years. Who knows? Maybe that's going to be automated. So you need to align yourself with the future. Number one. Two, work on your classic skills. presentation, start a YouTube channel. What stops you from starting a YouTube channel? Write on LinkedIn, so do all these things that keeps you up to date, and also, find a mentor.
Awesome, Phillimon. Thank you for that. Yes, we've got 3 minutes left. There's one question I'd like to still ask, and then we'll wrap up. What are the common pitfalls or obstacles that professionals might encounter in their cybersecurity careers, and how can they navigate them?
Oh, wow, that's quite broad.
It is broad. Maybe you can pick one or two.
What are the obstacles? The biggest challenge that cybersecurity professionals face is they hit the technical ceiling, which means, when you're starting off, you become a pen tester, you work yourself in the functional space, but you get to a point where you've got diminishing marginal returns. Your salary is not increasing much. You're just getting the CPI increases. Your title remains the same. You remain a cybersecurity architect forever. Maybe you want to remain a cybersecurity architect forever, but how do you break from technical space into leadership space? And that's exactly what we do. And I go back, you need to focus on your commercial acumen, which means beyond understanding the cloud and the encryption algorithms and the MFA systems and the like, you need to understand the business value chain, which means you intentionally networking with key decision makers, which we call the high influence, high interest stakeholders. You have coffee with a CFO, you understand how the business makes its money, how are the critical decisions made, what keeps them awake at night, and all this requires, especially with technical professionals, we really struggle with this. You go to conferences, after the conference, people are in breakout spaces, you need to network, you need to meet people, because who you know is much more important than what you know. But a lot of cybersecurity professionals, they revert to their comfort zone. You see them stuck in a corner holding a goodie bag. But myself, I've told myself that fear is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it doesn't stop you from taking that vital first step. So do things that you are scared of, get into the CFO's diary and schedule some meeting, learn about the business, go out into industry events, network with people, be curious about people, learn about their passions, their deepest fears, and, connect with them at interpersonal level. Those are the people that are going to help you. They'll give you a cybersecurity job. If you break out and become a CISO like me, they'll give you a cybersecurity contract. So do things that you are scared of.
Thanks, Phillimon. That's great advice. We have come to the end of our time. Phillimon, I just want to thank you for all your insights and inspiration. I'm feeling extremely encouraged. I want to go and re-listen to this again, just to pick up some more golden nuggets. But we really appreciate your time and for your contribution to the ISC Cape Town chapter. We do wish you all the best going forward and look forward to walking a long and profitable and prosperous road with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and like I said, let's connect on LinkedIn. Yes. And I wish you all the best in whatever you choose to do. No matter where you are, you can rise past any challenge and become who you want to be. And so thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and it feels nice doing it back to the home continent of Africa.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your time. Look forward to meeting you again in the next webinar.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye.